All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg and just had a little frog or something in my throat. Really happy to be joined today by Jack Quirk. And we've had great guests all week, starting with Arlen Monday, yesterday Liz Croydon, the comic, and you can get tickets to see her in Hanover if you click on the link, which I actually put in today's broadcast description as well. Yesterday was a big election day. I mean, it wasn't huge, of course. It's not an even year, but a number of races. And so Jack is here to help us make sense of them. Jack, great to see you. Great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me.
How you doing there, Hal? What's going on?
It's really fun to just do this. I'm enjoying it, and it's great to talk to you and other friends like Liz and Arlen. This week, I will be on tomorrow. Actually, the free-for-all. Usually I do the free-for-all on Friday. That's kind of any topic people want, and hopefully we'll call. Haven't been getting that many calls, but maybe we'll get one or two today or more with you. And the free-for-all is going to be tomorrow because I'm going to be up in New York for the weekend, and I got to leave early Friday. Actually, a little bit of a college reunion, meeting some good, old friends. Really, I mean, old, literally old now, Jack. Not quite as old as you are, but we're close. We're getting there.
As I am.
There aren't a lot of people. No, we're not. Very rare. Very rare. So you're kind of peripatetic. When we first met, Jack, of course, was in Monterey County, prosecutor there. Then he's moved on to, I think first was it Michigan, then Illinois, and now from the land of Lincoln to the Grand Canyon State, which I think is actually kind of kismet, because we're going to talk about next year's election quite a bit. And Arizona, one of those famed swing state, a purple state, according to the New York Times. Before we even get into last night's election, I want to ask you, the New York Times says in its latest polling, Arizona is definitely leaning back towards the red. Of course, it went for Biden in 2020. Is that your sense, Jack, living in Arizona?
I gotta ask. I mean, obviously, I see a lot of Trump signs around here, but I gotta ask a question. These polling outfits, do they just call landlines, or do they actually call people's cell phone?
Jack, I don't know the answer. I think it depends on the pollster. But there have been quite a number of polls, and they tend to all show the same thing, which is movement towards Trump and away from Biden.
Well, that didn't seem to work out last night, did it?
Not at all.
In Virginia. So, I mean, I don't understand where they're going with that. But, I mean, it basically boils down to I can't predict the future, but what it about. But I do not understand how the polls themselves seem to lean more right than what turns out to be the result, what turns out to be the case. But we'll see.
Well, it's interesting, too, because in recent years, the polls haven't leaned right. For example, in 2016, he became famous. A Princeton professor actually had to eat a bug because he was so confident that the polls correctly identified the winner, Hillary Clinton, that when Trump was actually, crowned, or whatever the term you want to use, was determined by media to have won the election, he had to actually go on TV and eat a bug. And in 2020, the elections tended to overstate slightly, not by much, Joe Biden's margin of victory.
Well, in 2016, Clinton actually, in a sense, did win because she had won the popular vote by quite a margin, but.
Well, she got the plurality of the popular vote. The actual vote count, if you added Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson to Trump's total and you added the Green Party candidate Jill Stein's vote total to Clinton's, you would have seen Trump win if you combined those two parties on the right. They actually got over 50% of the vote. And even though it's true that Clinton won the plurality of the popular vote, the state polls also strongly suggested that Clinton would win, although not by nearly as large a margin in the Electoral College as she was projected to win popular vote. But your point is well taken. So we'll get to the states, though, according to the Times, and I mentioned Arizona. That's where, according to the Times, along with Nevada, your state to the north, Trump is winning. You know, he's opened up an 11-point lead in the New York Times latest polling of that state. I frankly don't believe it. I don't buy it, but I'm just
throwing
that out
possible. There. I mean, when I examine what the public says, they look at things like gas prices. They look at the inflation situation. Now, of course, a president only has marginal impact upon something like inflation. And we knew that there was going to be some inflation back during the pandemic as government aid was as generous as could be imagined under those circumstances. And we knew that was going to have an inflationary effect, but we still had to do it because the situation would have been a lot worse had the government not provided the aid that it did during that period of time. So, you know, people look at things like inflation. They vote on the economy. They vote their pocketbook. You know, it was the thing during the Bill Clinton election. It's the economy.
It's the economy, right? Stupid, right? That's the argument.
Well, you know, that's just it. Well, even though the president has a marginal impact upon the economy, and it doesn't
and just to push back a little, I think what you're saying is true about the government. You know, government spent an awful lot of money to alleviate the pain that was caused by the COVID crisis and by some other factors. But the inflationary effect was magnified by the failure of the Democratic, at that time, controlled Congress to push aggressively for a significant tax hike on the wealthy. That would have reduced the inflationary effect. It wouldn't have eliminated it because you would have had more spending still from poor, struggling, and working people, but you would have tamped down some of the investment, which also, you know, some of the purchasing of bonds and the like by the rich, which would have reduced the inflationary effect as well. So there were ways the government could have addressed the crisis without driving prices up to the degree that it did.
Well, the Republicans still had enough impact on government during that time to prevent any tax hikes. So
not if the Democrats had stood in lockstep, and of course they.
Well, they'd have to eliminate the filibuster rule,
which they could have done.
They could have,
and they chose not to. So, in fact, the Democrats do deserve some of the blame for.
Manchin and Sinema chose not to.
Well, they're Democrats, and isn't it fair to say that there are many in the Democratic Party who don't want to see taxes go up on the wealthy? It's not just Sinema and Manchin. Probably Joe Biden would meet that definition as well.
Well, Sinema and Manchin were the ones that were trying to prevent. Well, they successfully prevented the end of the filibuster rule. But I don't know what Biden would want to do with the taxes if he had a free hand. But I think he would certainly raise taxes at least to Clinton's level, Bill Clinton's level.
It may be true. It may be true. I mean, the American people believe strongly this was a winning issue for Democrats if they chose to use it. Poll after poll says that Americans believe that the rich do not pay anywhere near the amount in taxes they should pay.
Well, of course not. They don't.
Yeah.
Not under any. I think we should go back to the way it was before Reagan.
I'm with you. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the economy worked better then too, Jack, right? With a 70% top marginal rate. The economy actually worked better, certainly for poor, struggling, working Americans.
Oh, sure. Well, no, I mean, we've gone back to the robber baron capitalist days with this, but hey, people keep voting Republican, and so that's what we end up with.
So glad to have.
If we keep doing it, one day they're going to get rid of Social Security and Medicare. Then where are we going to be? So
and there's been talk by Democrats of at least cutting benefits.
I wish I could talk some sense into them, But I remember there was a guy I knew back in Illinois, and he was a really good guy, but when I would get into a conversation with him about this, he kept saying that the Democrats are going to take my guns. And I would try and talk to him about it. And I'd say, they're not going to take your guns. Are you crazy? The only thing they're going to do is get rid of those rifles that look like military rifles. That's the only thing. But he was confident they were coming for his shotguns. So, and then I said, well, and of course he had his wife was having medical issues, and I said, and I mentioned that to him, and I said, I can see where the Democrats would be better for your wife situation, but I can see where you wouldn't care about that, so you could keep your shotguns. But what the heck? I do not understand. I think that there's two things that are standing in the way of some of the things that you and I both would want, and that's disinformation. Like the Democrats are going to confiscate everybody's firearms, and that's number one. Number two is the fact that people just don't. They're indifferent. You try and get them out to vote, and they say, "Nah, I'm going to struggle anyway," or they just don't pay attention to what's going on. I think. What is it? I think it's people just don't understand what's headed their way. And I think the reason why they don't understand what's headed their way is because they don't want to look at that. People.
Well, it's very depressing. I mean, things are really rough, but also I think there's a real sense that Democrats aren't fighting for anything. And at least the Republicans are fighting for something, albeit often the wrong thing. But you mentioned guns, so I just wanted to show this. I don't know if you can see your screen. You've got a smaller screen, but I've got that picture of that assault weapon. You mentioned the government coming for you. What about the fact that people with weapons like this are coming for Americans and killing them? Is that a winning issue? It wasn't for your Illinois friend, apparently, but you think most Americans, my sense is yes, common sense gun laws would go over well. The problem is the wealth and the influence of lobbies like, in this case, the American, the NRA, National Rifle Association. And we see the same thing I talked about this with Arlen also the other day. These special interest groups like the NRA and AIPAC are doing such a disservice to our democracy and keeping us from policies that most people feel strongly would be the right direction for our country.
Well, I think most people would like common sense gun laws, but there's a whole lot of people, Hal, that just do not grasp that the government is not coming for their guns. If you don't own a rifle such as is depicted in that picture, you don't have anything to worry about. They're not going to come and take your hunting rifles or anything like that. But people don't appreciate that fact, and they worry about it. And they shouldn't, but they do.
So you mentioned obviously guns are an issue that seems, at least on its face, to work for Republicans and many. Maybe in swing states. Pennsylvania, for example, is a big gun-owning state. There are others, Wisconsin as well. So in the Midwest. But I remember back in Monterey days, a good friend, Dennis, sadly no longer with us, used to say that abortion was an issue that was really bad for Democrats. A, was he right then? B, it seems, would you not agree? And I know you have a different view on choice, on reproductive rights, at least when it comes to abortion, than most progressives anyway. And I call you a progressive, even though you recoil at that term. So are we seeing a change, or is it politics? What has led now to abortion apparently favoring Democrats, which is certainly the takeaway from the New York Times in its commentary of yesterday's election? And it's hard to argue, given in a state that has gone Republican in the last 3 elections, I believe, including Barack Obama's 2012 win, yet the right to choose won by over 13% yesterday in the Buckeye State. Any thoughts?
Well, there's as people get older, that means that the young people get older and reach voting age, and abortion is more popular with those folks. I just think that I think that we've misunderstood the terms pro-life and pro-choice over time. There's a lot of folks that will say they're pro-life, but what they really mean is that they just, they want to restrict it to the first trimester or something like that. And when the Republicans come out with really strong anti-abortion laws and restrict it, like in Florida, to 6 weeks, then there's people are going to react to that. But in general, what's going to happen is that people are going to look at it in terms of, are you for or against abortion? And by and large, people don't want a situation where they don't have any abortion available at all. Okay. They're not going to look at the nuances of, are we going to restrict it to 15 weeks or 6 weeks or what have you? They're just going to look at, okay, is abortion going to be against the law, or is it going to be allowed? That's what people are going to look at. And the Republicans, they sound like they're saying they're going to make it against the law in all circumstances, and so people vote against that. Now, you were talking about my position. Well, my position, of course, is, the Catholic position, because, I'm
you're Catholic, Jack. We used to call you that. I chose not to today because I hadn't confirmed that with you. But yes, you are well known as Catholic Jack as well in some circles, including mine.
But that's just the Catholic position on abortion. Just isn't particularly popular. In fact, even among Catholics, it isn't. But I've told.
Well, what is the Catholic position? No abortion except in the case of the life or health of the mother. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's it. And but the thing is that we're not. I think a lot of people made the mistake that we're going to somehow get to that through legislation, and we're not. We have to persuade. I think it's been a big lesson for Catholics who are involved in politics. We can't impose our religion through legislation. We're just going to have to try and persuade people of our position, and then maybe someday the culture will change. But that's just we've just done a really bad job with it, and particularly the fact that the pro-life position has been a part of the Republican Party, but the Republican Party is so obnoxious on other issues that the pro-life position gets associated with that.
Well, I think it's also fair, Jack, to say that, except arguably, if you want to take the position that being anti-abortion rights is pro-life, and I'll for the purpose of this conversation, that's fine. On other issues that people such as yourself and many Catholics believe are also pro-life, such as against the death penalty, such as universalizing healthcare, or at least making it much more accessible for everyone. And I think you would argue that is also pro-life.
Of course,
they aren't. They're not with you there.
No, that's my. But that's that's exactly my point. If you're gonna vote pro-life, I think there's a lot of reason to say that the left is more pro-life than is the right, even though the left, or the so-called left, tends to be more liberal with respect to its position on abortion laws. But yeah, that's the.
Well, let's get into this a little more, because there were a lot of things you said, and I want to kind of try to narrow it down a little bit, parse things out a little bit. One thing I really was interested is how you said that when people hear the Republican position, they're not seeing nuance. Whether there's nuance or not, they're just seeing it, hey, I have a right, or I had a right to do something, and now I don't, which is kind of similar to what you were saying about the gun position, right? Where people say, I have a right to carry a firearm, or I had one, and I don't want it impinged in any way, which I think kind of makes a lot of sense. And if you look at what happened in Virginia, the governor there, Glenn Youngkin, who was positioning himself as a reasonable Republican, an alternative to Trump, he was saying, hey, we can have some restrictions on abortion, maybe 15 weeks. So if you're pregnant right away, you know you're pregnant, you don't have the kid, you go ahead and have your abortion. But after 4 months, no more. He portrayed that, and Republicans wanted to reasonable 15-week limit. I'm sorry, common sense. There would be exceptions in rape and incest, and I presume obviously the health or life of the mother. Didn't go over, didn't work. The Republicans still lost the House of Delegates, where they had a majority. They did not gain the Senate back, where they didn't have a majority. It looks like they may lose a seat in the Senate or two. And at the same time, Youngkin is the governor there, but his influence is waning. And this was with the Democrats making a huge issue. And I know this. I live near Virginia. I get Virginia ads. This was in every ad I saw over and over. They're going to take away your right to choose. They're going to take away. It's too extreme for Virginia. And obviously that worked. That worked. Of course it worked. That's what you do. That's how you disseminate political information. You avoid nuance at all costs. So that's how people look at these things. There's. I mean, was it fair to say that the position Youngkin took was kind of designed not to satisfy anyone? It wouldn't satisfy his hard right base. It's not gonna, what's the word I'm trying to say? Where it's not going to activate the evangelicals, the people down there in Lynchburg at Liberty University, and the pastors there to just say you've got to get out, you've got to vote, you got to vote for the Republicans, while at the same time the suburban Washington and Richmond voters who might be on the fence, some of whom are, the famed soccer moms and the like, were absolutely gung-ho to stop this.
Well, I think it's just that nuance is hard to disseminate to the general public, and the political class seems to try to avoid it at all costs. Do
you think it's fair, Jack, that the Democrats are getting the benefit of a right-wing Supreme Court decision when the Democrats have consistently, lost elections, and that's why the Republicans have gotten those justices in power, and when the Democrats have had majorities where they could pass in some state legislatures a right to choose, or legislation in Congress, they failed to do that. And yet now, because of their often inaction and poor political judgment and political sensibilities, they're getting a major political benefit.
Well, yes, it's almost as if the Democratic fecklessness is benefiting them. But yeah, I think so. The fact that when the Supreme Court overturned Roe, I think a lot of people's initial position was that all of a sudden now abortion is against the law, even though all it did was return the issue to the states. But yeah, the abortion has been seen as a right, and it looked as though the Supreme Court was taking away a right, and now people are responding.
Catholic Jack Quirk with us. I'm sorry to interrupt you real quick, Jack. You're watching Halitics. Thank you so much for being part of our program. You can call in. The phone lines are open. 240-363-7191. We've got a lot to get. 7190, sorry, not 91, 7190. The phone number is correct on the screen. Jack, I didn't see this before, but here's another issue that I would think the Democrats would be pretty smart to make hay with. This is legalizing marijuana. You can see that it actually won by even a larger percentage in trending red Ohio. And look at all those counties that are in blue on that map all over the state. A map like that, and Democrats win easily the presidency. What do we do with it? What should I guess President Biden's advisors, what should be the talk in the war room there? In the West Wing when it comes to campaigning on marijuana?
Well, nobody asked me what to do when it comes to political strategy.
Well, I just did. So there you go.
But here's the thing. I mean, I don't think that the Democrats have a lot of common sense when it comes to political strategy, which is part of the reason why they lose. But another reason why they lose is because the system is so rigged against them. The electoral college, the way that it is now, works against them, such that Biden has to get a 4% lead in the popular vote if he's going to win. Gerrymandering tends to work against Democratic interests, with capital D. I think small d as well. But they just don't fight on how can I put this, on the structural issues, the Democratic structural issues that would advantage them. I mean, you have to get rid of the Electoral College, or if you can't get rid of the Electoral College, you need to increase the number of representatives so that because we haven't increased the number of representatives since the beginning of the last century, and as you know, the Electoral College is based on how many senators and representatives the state has. So you have to increase the numbers in the Electoral College if you're going to have a more democratic, both large D and small d result, and benefit the Democratic Party in that respect. But the Democrats don't fight for that. They don't.
That's a really astute point, Jack. I don't know why people aren't asking for your advice, because that makes perfect sense to me, what you just said. Hey, why not, add another 50 reps into the House of Representatives, and then that will lead to more representatives in swing states and Democratic states, and probably help Democrats win the White House, and also keep the House at least Democratic.
Well, sure, yeah, the Senate, because it's two senators for each state, that could still have a tendency to be Republican. Although interestingly, right now it's Democratic, but that could change in the next election. But House of Representatives and President, there's no real reason why, with the configuration of things now, that the Democratic Party wouldn't just hold both of those without any problem. But for some reason, they don't fight against the way that the House of Representatives and the Electoral College are configured. It turns, what the original First Amendment had to do with the increase of the House of Representatives over time, and it didn't pass perhaps because there was a clerical error in it, but it. But if we had passed that without the clerical error, we'd have something like 1,700 members in the House of Representatives now.
Yeah, that sounds vaguely familiar to me. Maybe you had told me this before. I think you may have, or someone else who's knowledgeable like yourself. By the way, Jack, we've got a caller we'll get to in just a moment. Caller, thank you for calling in. But I was curious if you've got a website or somewhere you'd like to promote. I called you commentator because I didn't have a URL. But is there anywhere that you want people to know they can get more information from Jack Quirk?
Oh, not at present. I might fire up a blog again. I was working on something like a book-like project, and I sent it off to an editor, and we'll see if he likes it. He hasn't gotten back to me yet, but that I was focusing on that, and so I wasn't working on my blog Quirk's Perspective, but I might fire it up again in the near future. That was, if I recall correctly, that was Quirk's Perspective.
I thought it was just Quirk Perspective. I don't think there was an S in there.
Well,
maybe there was.
Ways, I guess. I haven't been back to that in a while, but maybe I'll fire up another blog. But right now, no. I've been incognito on the internet lately.
It's pretty impressive that you put together a book. I mean, I've sat down and tried to write, more than a few pages, and I always get stuck. I don't have maybe don't have the skill or just don't have the wherewithal or the stick-to-itiveness. I think I can write shorter pieces. I've had a few out there that I think are pretty good, but it's tough to write, chapter after chapter. So that's good, Jack. Way to go.
Well, it's not very big. It's kind of novella size, but it's and it's basically a Socratic dialogue. But we'll see if I'm able to make that work. And but it's a hard thing to break into because the established commentators are
it's tough.
You have to break into. Of course,
the more you do it, the better you get at it too. And if you're getting paid to do a book, then it's much easier to do one and then do the next one and the one after that. Let's get our caller on. We've got you now, wireless caller from Salinas. Who is this?
Good morning, it's John.
Hey, morning, John. Good to talk to you.
Good morning, Hal.
Hey, John. I'm glad you called. I didn't get to it, but I do have your post on Facebook about the polls. So if you want to weigh in on that, go ahead. But first, whatever you were calling about, maybe that is why you called. I don't know.
No, I called in because Jack was saying Democrats don't fight hard enough on structural issues that are opposed to them. And I think the greatest example of that is voter suppression. I think that has the greatest impact. Well, maybe not as great as gerrymandering, but I don't really ever see. I mean, it's been going on for a long time, and I don't really ever see any Democrats bringing this up when they're on MSNBC or CNN. And I think it's getting to the point where if you count the number of people who have to vote on provisional ballots across the country, it's well over 1 million. In some elections, I think it's been over 2 million. And I mean, that is a glaring issue that should be addressed. And I don't ever hear anybody talking about it.
Yeah, John,
Jack, talk about it.
I'm with you, John. But that's critical. If the Democrats are going to achieve the political success that, frankly, they're entitled to, given the numbers. I mean, there are more Democrats than there are Republicans, and that is a perennial situation. But the Democrats can't take advantage of it unless they fix the underlying structural issues that hold them back. And one of them is the population of the Electoral College, and the other is the population of the House, and the other is what you talked about. So, those things have got to change.
And the media's job is basically to protect democracy, to protect our rights, and they're dead silent on it too. I mean, I've seen a couple of stories that talk about it, but if you really want to get information about this, you have to go to Greg Palast. And, he's the one that's posting all the information about lawsuits that are going on around the country. Otherwise, if you're going to read about it in the New York Times, it's like on page 34, and, it's just really obscured, and it has such a huge impact. I don't.
I think part of the problem is that they got to sell papers or sell advertising, and those type of issues are the kind that a lot of people would find boring. Okay, it's much more interesting to deal with the sexy issues like abortion or gun rights or what have you, all the things that get people riled up.
Trump's indictment. Trump's indictment.
Yeah, that's another sexy issue. But fixing the structural situation in the country, frankly, to turn it into the circumstance that was intended by the founding fathers, that's just not interesting. That doesn't sell advertising, so that might be part of the problem.
Yeah.
Hey, John, let me ask you about your post, because on Facebook, I just put it on the screen. I did ask the question in my promo image for this program today, is Trump really winning? And the reason I asked that question is because the results last night were have to be heartening for Democrats, right? And I'm not particularly pro-Democrat at all, but I was pretty pleased with the results. I was happy about the abortion. I was happy about the pot. I was happy Virginia went to the Democrats, and I was pleased Andy Beshear won in Kentucky. You're saying, I believe, that those are facts. A poll is a fact, but the poll is based on a snapshot, and it's only as good as the pollster and the people interviewed. Your view is that you don't believe those polls are accurate at all. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm having trouble at this point believing that the methodologies they're using, reflect accurate outcomes. I don't think they do anymore. And I don't know why that is, but, one of my suspicions, which is probably unfounded, but one of my suspicions is that maybe a lot of those pollsters feel that their function is to help the media make a horse race out of, this election, so that, the 2024 election cycle, so that they keep their profits up. But I know a lot of those polls are conducted by the media, so I'm not so sure I trust those. But the ones that are conducted by universities, I don't see how they can be corrupted. But I just don't understand, if they don't reflect accurately the outcome.
Well, let me jump in real quick. So a couple thoughts on this, and I do want Jack's response. One is the polls may well be somewhat inaccurate, especially if they're undercounting younger voters. I don't know if they are not. But in terms of the polls being somehow corrupted by the interests of the pollsters, to me, that seems unlikely because we've seen a significant shift in all the polls. It's not just one or two. And these tend to be, I think, reliable polls, certainly according to Nate Silver, New York Times, CBS. We're seeing it on a state level and on a national level. It may well be, again, though, that they're undercounting young voters. So those are all possibilities. But what about the possibility, the thought that in general, democratic positions, while in my view are often insufficient and often reflect their own, self-interest as much as Republicans do, they're still more popular or less unpopular than Republican positions as a whole. But Joe Biden is just a bad candidate. He's too old. He clearly appears to be, and I'm just giving you this as an opinion that many people may share. He's too, he struggles to articulate clearly and concisely, and he doesn't seem to have a strong moral compass. Whereas Trump certainly doesn't mince words. He's out there saying he's clearly he has no moral compass at all, but he's very clear about what he seems to stand for. Biden doesn't. So though this may be a Joe Biden problem rather than a Democratic Party problem, which becomes, of course, a Democratic Party problem because Joe Biden is the leader of the party. So, Jack, you go, and then John, please respond as well if you want to that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of ageism that's hurting Biden right now, but I gotta wonder about the methodology the pollsters use. I mean, did they go through the phone book? Because if you go through the phone book and call people, you're just going to get people with landlines, and people with landlines are older. Those they're my age. We just got rid of our landline. When we moved here, when we moved to Arizona, and because it finally dawned on us that that's pointless to have one of those, and now we just go with our cell phones. But if we had a landline, well, then somebody can look us up in the phone book. And if the pollsters are just getting the numbers from the phone book, what they're gonna call it. You touched on this, Al. It's gonna skew old, and old is more conservative by and large, which is strange to me because the Republican Party wants to get rid of Social Security and Medicare, but there's I think that the Aristotle.
I think the best pollsters
that human beings are the rational animal is overstated.
I mean, just a quick comment on that. I mean, Nate Silver, who's kind of the oracle, he's the guru of polls. He has not raised this as a concern. He said the best pollsters do call both cell phones and landlines. And he has also argued that polls remain about as reliable as they ever have, which is pretty reliable, not always right. But generally, if they say a race is moving in one direction, and you don't have, it's not an outlier or two, it's the mass of the polling, you can take it not to the bank, but you would not be wise to bet against it either. John, your thoughts?
Okay, so one real quick, and I know I brought this up before, but in the 2020 election cycle, Super Tuesday, the polls leading up to Super Tuesday showed Bernie with double-digit leads in like California and Texas and some really big states. He was looking like he was going to win Super Tuesday. The day before, and I forget the name of the pollster, but you can look this up in New York Times database if you have a script in New York Times, or if you're a member of taking a unit at a community college somewhere. You can see that the day before there was a pollster that dumped some numbers that just were completely off from the other polls, and sure enough, I mean, Super Tuesday comes around and those other polls were wrong and that one pollster was right. And unfortunately, also, there were exit polls that were way off everywhere. So something happened there. Since then, I've looked at polls with a very discriminating eye. I don't know what to do with them anymore. But I mean, I still look at them, but I don't know what to do with them anymore. And secondly, when you were talking about Biden, with there being an issue of morality, like, is he doing the right thing here? I think that what factors into that and what doesn't often get discussed because of, it just kind of shows how, I don't even know what the word is, but geopolitics is the subject. There is a reason why Biden takes the positions that he does, and I think that he feels like overall he is making the right choice morally, but that's factoring in a lot of other things that take geopolitics into account. And I think it with the case of Russia and Ukraine, it's pretty obvious that we have an obligation, even though you say we're supporting war. I say we're supporting freedom. We're even supporting feeding Africa by helping Ukraine. You know, that we have a moral obligation to do that. And I think that not everybody's going to see it that way. And that's a geopolitical issue, you know?
Well, even if Joe Biden is motivated in his support for Israel, notwithstanding the complete refusal of Netanyahu to even entertain taking his foot off the throat of the Palestinian people, even if he does believe as you do and many others, and I think it's a better, I think you have an argument in this case, even if he does believe that supplying Ukraine with arms so they can fight an endless war, which they're losing against Russia, even if he believes that's the right thing to do, he has failed, I believe, to make that case to the American public. The Revolutionary Black Network, and I didn't get this clip, but one of the hosts there, Nick, said that he believes that our long slog in Ukraine has really soured the public on Biden. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I would say it's not helping him. You want to comment, Jack, and I'll get last word from John before I let him go. Then I want to move on. I got a couple more clips I want to play for you. So, yeah, go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, I think that there's something to that. The right wing certainly is opposed to helping Ukraine, but I think that has a lot to do with the fact that they also favor Putin. But I to turn it into my position about that, I certainly don't think it's because Biden is a warmonger or any of those other things that are talked about. Biden didn't start that war. He didn't get Putin on the phone and say, hey, why don't you invade Ukraine so that I can help the military-industrial complex. I also disagree that Ukraine is losing the war because they've certainly kept Russia at bay to an extent that when the war started, people didn't believe was possible. So, yeah, I suppose you could say that we're extending the war because we're giving the Ukrainians a chance to fight back. But to me, that's not the same thing as
well, I don't want to get into an argument. I'm just making the point that I think it's not helping him. It's not helping him in the polls. And that's what that's what I heard also from this other host who is very much against the war and our support of you.
Yeah, I think that most of the people that are against aiding Ukraine are going to vote Republican anyway. I know that there's
young people, but it's definitely hurt Biden's standing with young people, and so has the support for Israel. In fact, it's killed him among Arab Americans, especially young Arab Americans, which I think is somewhat ironic. And John, I do want to get your final point before I let you go. I think it's kind of ironic, though, because Trump is even worse on Israel-Palestine than Biden. At least Biden sort of frets and, rubs his hands together and showing his dismay at what's happening to the Palestinians, whereas Trump is full steam ahead to Netanyahu. But Biden's sort of middle of the road position there without actually taking an aggressive stance against Israel is still hurting him in the polls. John, go ahead.
Yeah, the only last thing is I agree with Jack that Ukraine is not losing that war. They have just recently started training on F-16s, and they need a few more of those ATACMS, those long-range artillery rounds, and they'll be able to hit Russian ports in the Black Sea. And it's just they need more. They're fighting a war with limited resources, partially because they weren't trained on a lot of the resources that were given to them, and they need the training, and partially because, possibly going into the future, they're going to have trouble procuring those resources from us. So, and
all right, John, thank you.
Maybe. All right.
Appreciate that call very much. I'm going to let you go at this point. We don't have that much time. I'll talk more about Ukraine tomorrow during the free-for-all. Jack, final word for you. Then I want to play a clip. I got Wolf Blitzer here talking to David Axelrod, and it kind of goes along with this topic. Should Biden consider dropping out because his status in the polls is so bad? And does that change with regard, when you factor in yesterday's election results? So anything quick on, I guess you feel like, but let me narrow it down. Do you think Ukraine, putting aside whether Ukraine really is losing, whether this war has been bad for the United States or not, do you think it's hurting him in the polls?
No, I don't think it's hurting him in the polls with regard to those who are going to vote left. I mean, I think that the left has a very small sliver of people that are opposed to the Ukraine war. Maybe they're a vocal group and are heard, but no, I think that most of the opposition to the Ukraine war is going to come from the right wing, and they're not going to vote for Biden anyway.
It's interesting then. Why do you think, Jack, you being a Catholic who believes strongly, and I guess you say war should only be fought if they meet just war principles, and you think that this war does meet that standard, but generally, I think the left likes to consider itself to be more pro-peace, yet, as you correctly point out, except for, real hard lefties, progressives like myself, it does seem that the Democrats are more in favor of keeping the killing going, and the war machine, the profits rolling in for the war the weapons makers. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's frankly, it's lack of nuance. Once again, I think that's been a theme today: lack of nuance. I'm against war and I'm for peace. Well, everybody's that. But the problem
I don't think that's not true. Okay. Netanyahu is clearly not against war and for peace. Hillary Clinton is not against war and for peace. There are plenty of people who aren't. They may say, but their actions so clearly belie that statement.
Well, okay, I meant everybody in terms of ordinary people that are the voting public of the United States. All right, yeah. So I'm against war and for peace, but I also believe in the right of a country to defend itself, and Ukraine is defending itself, and that's I see nothing wrong with helping them do that. Putin is clearly in the wrong here.
I've got Wolf Blitzer in this picture here, and I was so disappointed. Apparently, CNN last election day 1 year ago pulled Wolf Blitzer from his primary role doing elections with John King and Dana Bash, and they replaced Wolf with Jake Tapper, and they've actually relegated Wolf to a supporting role now on the network. I never watch CNN except on election nights, but I do watch them on election nights. I think they do a pretty nice and entertaining job. Jake Tapper is no Wolf Blitzer. Blitzer's much better. I don't know why you would ever make that change. Jack, do you want to weigh in on this?
No, I don't really care.
All right, here's Blitzer with David Axelrod, the guy who was probably most responsible after Barack Obama for putting Barack Obama in the White House.
Mm-hmm.
President Biden's campaign is downplaying a very grim new poll showing Donald Trump leading in multiple battleground states. But many Democrats are sounding the alarm, including David Axelrod, this chief strategist for the 2012 Obama-Biden presidential campaign, who tweeted that the poll, quote, will send tremors of doubt through the party. David is joining us right now. David, thanks very much for joining us. These are very brutal poll numbers. This is a New York Times Siena College poll. The results for the president, pretty bad. You suggested he should at least consider dropping out while also saying it's his decision. But as a Democrat concerned about Donald Trump, what do you want Biden to do?
I want him to consider what is best in terms of the goal that I know he is committed to, which is defeating Donald Trump. And if he believes, based on not just what's in his heart, but what's in data and what he's being told, that he has the best chance to do it, then he should run. But the thing that irritates me a little bit, Wolf, is this notion that people who are concerned are bedwetters is a phrase. Actually, I think it originated in the 2008 Obama campaign in a much different context. There is reason to be concerned, and people shouldn't dismiss these polls.
All right, so he says there, yeah, they shouldn't dismiss the polls. Cut him off at the very end there, Jack. You know what upsets me? I don't like the term bedwetters to dismiss people who have legitimate concerns. I also don't like people who don't ask questions. Wolf Blitzer asked him, what should Biden do? And he says, well, he should look into his heart. I don't want him to look into his heart. You're a political strategist. What do you think? Should he run or shouldn't he? And Axelrod obviously will not answer that question, probably, looking at his own, career and future. And he doesn't want to put it at risk if he says, yeah, Biden should step down. Especially if Biden ultimately wins, it would make Axelrod look really bad. And if he loses, people will blame Axelrod for the loss. So he won't say it, but I wanted to know. By the way, I think Wolf Blitzer has been getting a lot of pushback. He got pushback for that question, which I thought was a great question. He got pushback for his skeptical, jaundiced eye when he was talking to an Israeli Defense Forces flak about bombing a refugee camp. So Blitzer has kind of maybe put himself on the outs with CNN, I think, because he's trying to do his job. So good for you, Wolf Blitzer. Your thoughts, though, on that whole interchange. Is that all already dated, Jack, because of yesterday's election results?
Oh, I don't think it's dated because of yesterday's election results. The election is next year, and in politics, that's a long time. But I've been seeing that talk going on for some time now that Biden should step down because he's not likely to survive his next term. But I never hear anybody saying who the Democratic candidate should be. Okay.
Well, I've heard names like Gavin Newsom bandied about. There's this new Democrat who just entered named Phillips. I forget his first name. You may have heard of him. I never did. He's from Minnesota.
I saw him on TV. Yeah, but like you say, I never heard him before either. So So who's going to be the Democratic nominee if not Biden? Just as an aside, I don't really
Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, she did slightly better than he does in those polls. Maybe someone like a Klobuchar. These are not people I favor. I wouldn't vote for them, just as I'm not going to vote for Biden. But again, there are other names. There are younger people out there who there's really no one older. And certainly even Bernie seems much more vibrant, doesn't he, than Biden does.
Well, Biden's been that way all along. He's always been a gaffe machine. He's never been a great speaker. I don't understand it, frankly. I don't understand what the complaint is. Every complaint I hear about Biden has to do with the fact that he doesn't wave a magic wand over the world and fix everything. He's got. The president of the United States is a powerful position, but it's not an all-powerful position. It's not, it's not, the president doesn't have divine powers. Like I said, I think at the beginning is, people blame Biden for inflation, and there's nothing the president can do about inflation. Those are business cycles. I think what's happened is that the political rhetoric has overtaken reality, and people are. Biden is a bad choice for those who are looking at cosmetics, and I don't think cosmetics are important. I think he's done a fine job. He's not been as liberal as some people want, but there aren't enough liberals in this country or enough progressives in this country to have a progressive president.
Jack, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let that go. I could say something, but I'll wait till tomorrow. to respond to some of your points.
I see.
Say it again.
Huh?
What'd you say?
So I won't be able to respond tomorrow.
Well, we've been on for an hour. You can respond. You can call in at any time. 240-363-7190. It will be the free-for-all, so you will be absolutely able to respond. And you heard John. I give everyone plenty of time to reply. But
I know you do. It's just that I in my old age, it takes a long time for me to get going. So it's I started this out at
you're a lot younger than Joe Biden. So if your concern is your old age, then I would assume you would be concerned about Joe Biden's age, and it wouldn't just be ageism. But okay.
Yeah, well, I've always been a little slow on the draw. So
I mean, Jack, I think you would make a fine president. We didn't get into sortition, but that's an area I think we agree. I think we would get better representatives and better governance if rather than having and I like elections. I believe in democracy. I think we should choose our leaders, but the system is so corrupt right now, and it rewards bad behavior. The worst people are often the ones who run for office. I think we would do better if our leaders were, our political leaders were chosen randomly from the general populace. And I think you believe the same.
I've started to move towards sortition myself. Every time I think about it, I get closer to adopting it as my political philosophy. Because the democracy is a good idea in theory, but unfortunately, it's very corruptible. And in our situation here in the United States, it's extremely corruptible and corrupted. So
Jack Quirk with me on Halitics. Great to have Jack here. That's going to do it for today's program. I'm going to just make one more plea. Subscribe. I've lost a few subscribers the last few days. I think my focus on Israel's misdeeds and my harsh criticism has alienated some of you. I'm sorry about that. I wish you'd call me and tell me why you think I'm wrong rather than just simply cancel me. But I can't control what other people do. I can only do the best I can, which is what I give you every day, the best I can give you. I'll be back tomorrow, Jack. Thanks so much. Hope to have you back again soon. And we'll see you tomorrow.